Alright, so the last time I covered Quinfall, I was interested but skeptical about the game, and rightfully so. After all, the developer was making the grandiose claim of being the biggest MMO of all time, with a map 10 times the size of World of Warcraft, while coming from a studio who had yet to release a single game. That studio, Valrek Technology, was made up of just 56 people, which is on the very small end of team size for making an MMORPG. We also knew that Quinfall had only been in production for 3 years, starting its development in January 2021. And 3 years is about half the time big MMOs require, with most of them generally taking 5 to 7 years to make. And then lastly, from the gameplay footage we had seen of Quinfall, it looks pretty rough. There's no other way to say it. Specifically, things like the combat, movement, and animations did not appear to be all that good. But even knowing all of that, I was willing to give Quinfall a chance. After all, I'm not typically one to completely write off a game before I've had the chance to play it. And on the plus side was the fact that while the developer hadn't yet released a game, they did have one in-development title prior to Quinfall that went by the name of Kyra Online, a Turkish MMO that spent a couple of years in beta testing and appeared to be like a proof of concept for their newer game. So my general thought was, yes, Quinfall looked pretty rough. Yes, 3 years was a very short amount of time to develop an MMO, and yeah, they were making some ridiculous claims, but I wanted to wait until we saw and learned more before being too judgmental. Well, since that video, which came out about 2 weeks ago, we have learned a lot more about Quinfall, and it's not looking good. With every bit of new information, things are getting progressively worse. It actually appears like we are dealing with yet another thrown together minimum viable product of a game, much in the same vein of what we saw with the day before. So let's go through what we've learned about this game. So for starters, remember that Quinfall gameplay trailer from a few months ago? Well, it turns out most, if not all of it, was made by other people and purchased from an asset store. So in March of last year, a YouTuber by the name of Nuion released a video going over everything that he was able to find in the Quinfall trailer, somewhere around 75% of it that was available for purchase in the Unity store. This included the animation where we see a character slam the ground and summon up a lava burst eruption. This came from the Realistic Effects Pack 4, which cost $42. Most of the basic enemies seen in the Quinfall trailer apparently come from this 14 character orc pack, which cost $50. The Archer, who splits into 8 spectral copies, well, apparently that effect came from the Archer Effects pack, which cost $22. The Archer itself was actually a purchased character model by the name of 3D Woman Paladin, which cost $40. The enemy the Archer is fighting came from a monster pack for $35. The Frost effect on the Archer's attacks came from the Realistic Effects Pack 3 for $28. The attack animations of the character fighting a scorpion came from Realistic Effects Pack 4 for $42. The scorpion itself came from the Giant Scorpion Animation Pack for $25. The water level turns out to just be buildings purchased from the Elysium Pack, which was originally meant to sort of be a city floating in the sky. Well, they took that city and just placed it on top of water. That cost them $200. And one of the funniest examples came from the ship sea ocean section. So those ships that we saw were not actually made to be saleable vehicles. They were instead supposed to be entire levels, playable levels. They bought that pack, and then that kraken in the ocean, it originally actually looked more like a crustacean, almost like a lobster hybrid thing. So they just rotated it, sticking its tentacles out of the water for their trailer. The video revealing this information just goes on and on and on, with Nuion meticulously combing through the Quinfall trailer, laying out every single character model, NPC, attack and spell animations, basic enemies, bosses, clothing, weapons, and entire environmental locations that he was able to locate for purchase in the Unity store. In total, he counted somewhere roughly around $1,700 worth of assets, and that is just what he found. There is probably more. In fact, we know there is, because recently in a new video released last week, Nuion was back with more evidence spotting additional purchased assets. These include the medieval themed city and buildings that were seen in various parts of the Quinfall trailers. This came from the Stronghold pack, purchased for $65. He then also went through the screenshots on Quinfall's website, where he was able to find several of them came from pre-built environmental asset packs. These included the underground cathedral, a cave system, and this desert city. He then also actually showed examples of how easy it is to recreate making these screenshots, just going through the process of picking an asset pack, booting it up in in Unity, importing the level, and then moving the camera around before taking a screen grab and color correcting the image. That is how they made, apparently, or this is a great showcase of how they could have made those screenshots themselves. Now, as has been covered time and time again, I want to make this clear. Using store-bought assets in your game, not a problem. After all, it is why they exist. People create these assets and put them on the marketplace in order to be used by studios to help ease the development process and to make it more affordable, as it's usually cheaper to buy an asset pack than it is to pay someone a wage to create something similar from scratch. So buying assets to use in your game, that alone, that's not a problem. However, it can become an issue if all of your game is store-bought assets and you're creating little unique content yourself. If all of your character models, all of the animations and the environments and even entire levels are just stitched together from store-bought assets, that is much more of an issue. So for one, it creates a clear lack of cohesion, with things feeling like they don't quite go together, because they probably don't. If you're pulling tons of different assets from different creators and putting them all into a single game, things aren't going to mesh, and we've seen pretty clear examples of this. It's pretty obviously why the gameplay trailer for Quinfall, you see a lot of stuff that looks super out of place, like the giant sandworm, the scorpion, and the upside-down kraken, and especially the various environments. They don't seem cohesive. They don't seem like they're made up of one single art direction, because they're not, because they came from different people who created different packs that the Quinfall developers purchased and cobbled together. And the other issue with using mostly or entirely store-bought assets to create your game is, what does that mean for future updates? So say if the Quinfall plans to get an expansion or to add new content, what does that mean? They're gonna have to go back to the asset store to purchase that new content, to purchase those new levels and those new characters and those new enemies? And if that's what happens, what if the people who made all of that original content, what if they don't make anything new? They'll have to start buying assets from different people. So again, even further going into the fact that they're going to be adding stuff to the game that doesn't fit together, that isn't cohesive, and doesn't feel like it belongs all in the same world. Now, of course, they could start by using purchased assets and then eventually create and develop their own, but they've not yet proven the ability to do so. If the fact is true that everything we're seeing in this original trailer is from an asset store, as it appears to be, it looks like they've not made much of anything on their own, except for maybe some of the randomly procedural generated environments that we've seen with some of these sweeping vistas. But again, Nuion's various videos have clearly showcased direct one-for-one copy-paste of various asset packs, character models, weapons, clothing, enemies, bosses, environments, entire levels. The evidence is abundant, so feel free to check out those videos if you want a more detailed look at all of that stuff. But the use of store-bought assets, like I said, in and of itself isn't a bigger issue. It does paint a picture of us questioning whether or not the people who are developing this game are capable of creating their own stuff. Is cobbling all of this together really going to result in a good game? We don't know as of yet, but I'm not holding my breath on that one. But the store-bought assets are just one part of the puzzle. There have been many more things that have come to light since the last video. First of all, there's this thing here where on the developer's website in the About Us section, they had a photo of their office, which isn't too unusual, except for the fact that it's not actually a photo of their office. It turns out to be a stock image of a generic office that they edited to display their logo. So if they do actually have an office location, it most certainly doesn't look anything like this. Now, according to the developer's LinkedIn page, they do have a physical location, reportedly somewhere in a university in Istanbul. I can't confirm or deny whether or not this is the truth, but that's where they say they are. Now, since all of this came to light, they have removed the office photo from their website and replaced it with just a basic logo of the studio's name. They did this after people started pointing out the fact that, hey, this is an edited stock image and not an actual photo of your office. There's also the fact that digging through the user agreement on Quinfall's website, people identified that the game will be making use of a virtual premium currency called V-Coins, of which the agreement states purchases can only be made through the website and will be non-refundable. It also states that V-Coins will not accumulate interest. Okay. Now, one image that we've seen of Quinfall did showcase the game's menu, and in that we noticed a store icon that had a giant V on it. Clearly, that is for the V-Coins. That's where you're buying V-Coins or where you're spending V-Coins or whatever. And speaking of interface, parts of Quinfall's UI appear to display the health, mana, and character level that is a direct one-for-one copy of the UI that's used in Black Desert Online. Now, beyond that stuff, there's the studio's prior game that was in development called Kyra Online, Online. Now, as mentioned in the last video, Kyra Online began its development in 2019. This was an MMO based on Turkish mythology, and while the game looked low budget and fairly dated, I was actually somewhat impressed. Apparently, they had released Kyra into beta in 2020 after only 1 year of development, and it was said to be made by a team of less than 5 people, originally starting with 1 developer that built up to a team of 5, and then after a year of development, they released Kyra. And yes, the game looked pretty rough, yes, it looked dated, but it also seemed functional and playable, and that was actually one of the things that left me feeling a little more hopeful about Quinfall, but boy oh boy, how wrong I was. What I missed was the fact that while in closed beta, Kyra Online had a massively pay-to-win cash shop, and apparently any purchases that were made during beta, as far as I could tell, were not refunded when the game was eventually shut down in 2021. Kyra's cash shop included all of the usual fare of paid-for resources, currencies, and progression boost. We see percentage modifiers for increasing experience gain, currency and ranks, reducing the cost of respecs and pet experience, reduced auction house tax, and much more. Now, these came in various pack types. The more you paid, the higher your tier, the better the percent boost that you were granted. But what's even worse than that is that it looks like they were partnered while in beta with this RMT site called buynogame.com. This is a currency and item reselling site that not only supported Kyra while it was in beta, but also sells items for ongoing games like Lost Ark. In fact, looking further into some of the various people who were actively streaming Kyra Online while it was in beta, it turns out that many of them were sponsored directly by Buy No Game, so it appears that what I mistakenly early on assumed was genuine interest in the game turned out to just actually be sponsored streams. Buy No Game was sponsoring people to stream Kyra while in beta because of the fact that they had an RMT portion of their site dedicated specifically to that game, so they were just trying to push traffic basically to the RMT site, and that is why there were hours and hours of Kyra Online footage online when I originally researched the game. So while some of this information has been around for many months now, a lot of it started to push to the surface in recent weeks, and as a result of this, the developer has came out with a response. In fact, just earlier today, they posted this on Twitter. As we continue to develop the world's largest MMO universe, Quinfall, spanning an impressive 216,000 square kilometers, they're really leaning into this, right? We want to maintain transparency with our users. In our development process, we leverage some ready-made assets to focus more on refining general mechanics and enriching the overall content. Our approach emphasizes that the significance lies not in using ready-made assets, but in creating a versatile structure that can incorporate them seamlessly. And that is absolutely accurate. There's actually nothing wrong with that portion of the statement. It's true, as I mentioned, using pre-made assets, they exist to be purchased and to be used. That's why these asset stores are there. But it's what else are you bringing to the game as a studio that actually makes it an enjoyable gameplay experience? And that is where the uncertainty lies with Quinfall specifically. There have been successful games in the past that have used store assets. That was most notably PUBG was a game that was full of store-bought assets, but because the developer crafted a good game, a good gameplay experience, a good gameplay loop around those assets, it turned out to be a good and massively successful title. So it is not an indictment of a game that there are store-bought assets. But when the first gameplay trailer that you release after some sleuthing turns out to be made up mostly, if not entirely, of store-bought assets, that raises the question of whether or not you're capable of creating anything to that level on your own as a studio. And that's just what it is right now. It's a question. We don't know. And so that does not instill me with much confidence. If you're building a lot of the game by yourself, but you're using certain buildings or trees or parts of the like little doodads in the environment, that is totally fine. But if your whole game is just assets stitched together, if that's the case, I can't say until actually playing your game whether or not you as a studio can turn that into a fun experience. And that is one of the things we can't tell in this video. We will have to wait and see until it actually comes out. Although I will forewarn you, you might want to hold off on purchasing Quinfall for a reason we'll touch on in a minute. But let's go back to their official announcement. So they go on to say, additionally, we choose to identify ourselves as Valrek Technology rather than Valrek Studios for a specific reason: our proprietary artificial intelligence technologies. This innovation allows us to streamline the universe creation process, saving a substantial amount of time. I don't dispute this either. I'm not saying that they aren't building the world's largest MMO. I think it's entirely possible if what you're building is just procedurally generated landscapes. Besides those landscapes, as we've reiterated over and over again, everything besides what looks to be procedural landscapes appears to be purchased in a store. So again, that is where our lack of confidence with them as a studio comes from. Moving on, they say, presently, our aim is to produce a video that showcases the extensive content discussed in our previous video, offering a gameplay perspective. Unlike a traditional trailer, we intend to provide insights into various dynamics from the player's viewpoint. We are excited to announce our plans for a video. I don't want your announcement for your plans for a video. I just want to see the video. This whole statement seems just entirely pointless. Just release a video showing raw gameplay of the game, or as close to raw gameplay as you feel comfortable with this stage of development. Just show us the gameplay that doesn't feature entirely store-bought assets. All of this is completely unnecessary. Now they go on to say that besides having gameplay footage, it will have a Q&A section where they're going to answer some questions, addressing numerous details that players have raised concerns about. Stay tuned for further updates, and thank you for being part of the Quinfall journey. I just want to see the trailer. These statements are so useless for the most part, but I did want to let you know that this is the official statement that Varrock Technology came out with. Now, outside of this response, there's one more thing that I need to mention before we wrap up the video. So while I was making the last video, Quinfall was scheduled to release onto Steam on January 30th. Since that time, the launch has been postponed. The release date on Steam is now listed as coming soon, and the game will instead be entering open beta at some point in the near future. Now, originally on various Q&As from the developer, they said that all beta testing for Quinfall would be entirely free. However, that too has changed. The closed beta is free, but anyone who will gain access to this has already been invited. So if you don't have an email with a code, you're not getting into the Quinfall closed beta. That beta will be under strict NDA, they said. Now, the open beta that they're planning on releasing sometime in the coming weeks to months, that is not free. It will be requiring a purchasing of a pack through Quinfall's website, after which you will be sent a Steam key to download the game. That is not a good sign. The purchases that you'll be making to get access to this beta are happening off of the Steam platform. With everything else that we've learned about Quinfall over these past few weeks, I'm going to tell you right now, you should be very cautious buying anything from the developer directly from their website, because if purchases to enter the open beta are only available on the Quinfall website and not through Steam directly, should the game turn out to be garbage, which there's a higher probability chance of that being the case than when we last talked about the game, it's going to be very difficult, if not impossible, for you to get a refund, barring like issuing a fraud refund request directly through your credit or bank card. Originally, I was skeptical about the game, but I was hoping for the best when it came for Quinfall. Like, sure, I didn't think it looked very good, and I was surprised that they were planning to release after only 3 years in development. That's not a lot of time for an MMO, but I was very much in a wait and see for myself mentality. I wanted to play the game before solidifying any opinion. At this point, though, even though I've not played, I'm fairly confident we're looking at yet another garbage MMO that's being cobbled together and released with the hopes of cashing out. Between Quinfall heavily relying or being made up entirely of store-bought assets combined with procedurally generated landscapes, the fact that we already know they intend to sell premium currency while also circumventing purchases being made on Steam so that you cannot issue refunds, that coupled with the knowledge that their last in-development game featured a pay-to-win cash shop while it was in beta, and then that game got shut down and didn't issue refunds, and then with all of the odd stuff like faking office screenshots, their office location being at a university, the copying of UI elements in BDO, and likely other games we've not spotted yet. All of these things come together to leave me incredibly skeptical, if not just outright convinced. This is not only going to be a good game, it may very well be a scam. At the very least, we're probably looking at a asset flip combined with procedurally generated terrain, and they're going to be asking you to buy their game or buy access to their game, not on the official Steam platform. Red flags, absolutely everywhere. I would avoid this one at all cost at this point. We'll see what the future holds, but yeah, things aren't looking good right now for Quinfall. That is going to do it for today's video, though. Thank you as always for watching. Hope you enjoyed. I'll see you next time.